is driving this? This whole Sanders phenomena. I think it's, I keep telling, I've had this conversation with you a number of times over the last couple of years. Actually, I put my book Screwed here in front of me to remind me. I wrote that book like 8 years ago, and it is more spot on right now than it ever was, because it documents how an entire generation got screwed. In fact, multiple generations, but now in particular the millennials. And screwed by these, by basically insider politics. It's like, the revolving door in Washington, D.C., where you have attorneys general who just came out of silk stocking law firms where they defended corporations, where you have people appointed to the Supreme Court who used to be tobacco lawyers, where you have people who are regulating Wall Street, who used to work for Goldman Sachs, where you have Treasury secretaries who used to work for Wall Street. This whole revolving door thing, and people are hip to it. People are getting sick of it. I suppose the embodiment of this kind of insider politics is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the leader of the DNC, and she's being primaried by Tim Canova. And I find it fascinating. Tim Canova is a real progressive. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is hard at work trying to gut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and reduce their ability, co-sponsoring legislation to reduce their ability to regulate payday loan lenders, so that who are predators against poor people. And this morning, the White House, President Obama has endorsed Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Debbie has been a strong progressive leader in Congress and a hardworking, committed chair for our national party since I proudly nominated her to that role in 2011. I strongly endorse her reelection to Congress and look forward to her future service on behalf of the people of South Florida. And Scuba, who reposted this over Democratic Underground, says, expanding economic opportunity for loan sharks ain't quite the same thing as helping the people, Mr. President. Yeah. But this is, the same thing happened with Martha Coakley. You'll recall Martha Coakley was running for the Senate in Massachusetts and lost to Scott Brown, as I recall. That was Scott Brown's election, wasn't it? Yeah. And, the president came out and endorsed her because it looked like she was losing. I wonder if this means that it looks like Debbie Wasserman Schultz is in real trouble. But, at the heart of all of this is, and there's a great piece on this, by Robert Kuttner over at Huffington Post right now, called Sanders, Socialism, and the Shafted Generation. And this really doesn't have to do with Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders. This is really about, I've been saying for some time, I think, Bernie has basically just picked up the torch of the Occupy movement. I mean, the Occupy and the Black Lives Matter movements. And, all of these various movement politics groups that are coming together. And this didn't start this year. This, arguably you could say this started at least 8 years ago. And I would say, you could say that this uprising really started in 2002 when over 1 million people went into the streets in the United States to protest George W. Bush's plans to attack Iraq. I was one of them. Paul Loeb and I were out in Seattle at a church out there. Mark Crispin Miller and I spoke at a bunch of places in New York. I mean, we were all over the place. And people were showing up, young people and everybody else. And then that became that anti-war movement, then kind of morphed into the Occupy movement. But the Occupy movement was really rigorously anti-leader, no leaders. And so without any public face, it kind of petered out. And of course, it was, brutalized out by the police. And now that's become the Sanders movement. And when Bernie goes on, let's say Bernie does not win the nomination. Or even if he does, if he does, then the path is very different. But let's say he doesn't. That movement's going to continue. And in fact, it's going to continue growing. And why? Because as Robert Kuttner says, it's the vanishing good job. And it's not just the gig economy. It's not Uber and TaskRabbit. Although I agree that Uber, TaskRabbit, and these other companies should be treating their contractors as employees. But it turns out temping, contract work, on-call workers, workers hired by staffing agencies, workers with no job security, inferior forms of conventional employment like these adjunct college professors who, even with a PhD, are making pennies. And he talks about how, increasingly all across our economy, jobs are being turned into low-quality jobs, inferior jobs. The Wall Street Journal, he writes, of all places, reports a 60% increase since 2005 in the proportion of U.S. workers who have these inferior forms of employment. And so a couple of economists, including Alan Kruger from Princeton, one of the people who is not a Sanders fan, actually did the math on this. And guess what? Cutter writes, they confirmed in rich detail what your local 28 could tell you. Real jobs are getting harder and harder to find. Real jobs.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.